If you're looking for clear pro-life thinking, cutting-edge apologetics, and a fresh approach to abortion dialogue, you've come to the right place. This is the Equipped for Life podcast.
Welcome back to the Equipped for Life podcast, and we are here for the next 2 episodes with a very special guest that we've been talking about having on for a long time, and I'm glad that we can finally get to it. We have Elijah Thompson, better known as the person who runs a much bigger pro-life Facebook page than ours, Dank Pro-Life Memes. So we are glad to have Elijah on. He's a friend of mine. He's a pro-life speaker now. We've spoken at the same pro-life events now, and we've got some interesting topics for him. And today we're going to be talking about snark, because that is something that Elijah is an expert at, and something that a lot of people have a lot of questions about. Should snark ever be used, and in what cases should it be used, and how does it affect persuasion? But before we get into all that, I did ask our followers, and I know you did the same thing, to kind of post, what questions would you want us to ask Elijah on this podcast? And I feel like I have to start with this question that we got from Alex Dietrich. He had a question. I just think I have to ask you before we ask anything else, which is, are you even pro-life?
Well, I guess it depends on the meaning of the word.
Good for you. Good job. That label can be confusing, can't it?
Yes, it can, especially when some people love it.
Become a thing. You're the one that started that a while ago, right?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, it was sort of like a like feeling out how the conversations typically went between pro-lifers and pro-choicers, and then I started the group initially with the Fetal Position podcast, and then I was like, well, I haven't put an episode of that in like a year, so maybe I'll just switch it over and open it to more people. And then when I made the transition, I was like, this would be a fun thing. Are you even pro-life? Because then it's like a kind of a play on the constant arguments that pro-lifers have with each other and with other pro-choicers. And so I made the group, and then tag groups on Facebook became a thing where like you tag people or you tag the group in a comment and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then so people started tagging my group, Are You Even Pro-Life, in the comment sections, and then it kind of blew up. And so then I made a shirt, and now it's my thing. So everything in the pro-life movement seems to happen to me. So I don't really do anything actively. Stuff just happens.
It's the page version of it's the no true pro-lifer fallacy is basically right. what you've done there. I get it.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about mocking and persuasion. And is this a thing that is helpful for pro-life advocates to do in person? Is it helpful to do maybe not in person, but in Facebook pages or memes, and maybe kind of talking a little bit of kind of compare and contrast what we do with you do. So why don't you, just for anyone of our listeners who for somehow don't know what Dank Pro-Life Memes is, why don't you talk a little bit about your page and what your goals are, what you're trying to do, as well as your thoughts on persuasion and snark. Just those things.
Just those things, just those small topics. Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting that we started off by doing the Are You Even Pro-Life thing, because essentially that has kind of become something that is, it initially was like an accusation. Like if you don't believe in this thing and that thing and this thing, are you even pro-life? And then what I ended up doing, I think, and this might just be because I live in my own little bubble or whatever, but it seems as though Are You Even Pro-Life has become something that we use to mock people who do that or mock that argument. I guess it depends on how, what kind of mood I'm in, whether or not I'm going to mock the person. Try not to, really try not to. I give them some chance, but yeah, so it's initially like it was coming from, I think, pro-lifers, some pro-lifers, and then mostly pro-choicers who would say, if you don't believe in universal healthcare, if you don't believe in gun control, if you don't believe in this, that, and the other thing, then how can you even call yourself pro-life? And the same accusation was being levied against the bulk of the pro-life community by the pro-life side, some of like the consistent life ethic types. Not all of them. I love a lot of those guys, but there was like a small select few of them that were just saying, how can you even call yourself pro-life if you don't believe these things?
Right.
And so essentially I kind of started poking fun, accidentally kind of poking fun at the idea that you have to add all these extra things to be pro-life, when in reality, if you just look it up in the dictionary, it's being against elective abortion. Like that's just the thing that it is. And so that, I guess, kind of makes its way into whether or not mockery and snark and stuff like that would be useful. but I guess it also depends on what you mean by useful. But anyway, I'll jump into my my page. Dank Pro-Life Memes was originally meant to be a sort of a fun little thing, like a creative outlet for my podcast, which if you know anything about the podcast, it hasn't been a new episode in quite some time. And then before that, it was literally a year. And so the podcast still exists, but it's you know, like the original kind of my entryway into the pro-life movement, pro-life activism and stuff. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to take the content that I was creating with the podcast and turn it into a more bite-sized format, because I wanted to promote the message, but I didn't really know how people, like, I didn't know how to get people to listen to my podcast more. And I was like, okay, what I'll do is I'll make these memes, promote them, but I didn't want to promote them because they're like off brand for my podcast. So I made the Dank Pro-Life Memes page, started rolling with it. And then I was like, okay, what I'll do is I'll take the audience that I get from Dank Pro-Life Memes and I'll forward it over to my podcast. And that worked for a little bit, but it turns out the people who like memes are not usually podcast people. Who knew? And so what I now have is a podcast that I say, yeah, I podcast sometimes, but really my main thing is Dank Pro-Life Memes. And from Dank Pro-Life Memes, I've gotten multiple speaking events. I was able to go out to California twice, do the emceeing for their conferences. I was able to speak with Laura Clausen. I was able to speak with her up in Canada. She had kind of invited me onto the stage because a lot of the teens that she was at knew that. I went to a Rehumanize thing that was like right at the beginning. I didn't speak there, but I met a lot of cool people. And so Dank Pro-Life Memes has sort of become my, you know, brand, I guess, in my way into it, which I wouldn't have originally expected. But hey, like I said before, things in the movement just kind of happened to me rather than the other way around.
And I think I want to talk about like how mocking or snark affects your goals and how it affects our goals, because I think that the goals maybe you're describing that you had with your podcast originally are probably closer on the spectrum of brand to what we do here at ERI than, you know, what you're doing with your meme page. So talk to us a little bit about what is your goal when you are creating social media content, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or somewhere else, with your meme page. Like what is your goal or goals, and how do you consider snark to play a role in that?
Okay, so the first thing that I guess I want to kind of copy what, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it's a podcast called A Clear Lens. A friend of mine named Nate and Gene and Logan, they do it. It's kind of a small Christian apologetics podcast. And he went live a little while ago on his page, just kind of testing out new equipment. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be on the ERI podcast talking about snark. And I really value this guy's opinion. So I was like, what do you think is the value of snark in Christian apologetics? And he said, he's like, read that and he goes, that's a really great question. Well, first, villain. And I was like, no, the villain. Okay. And he's like, okay, well, let me rethink this, because it was just like a spontaneous question. And he said, because he really puts for, I think you guys actually would line up a lot in your kind of way that you kind of approach conversations. He approaches that in a, he calls them relation or first date evangelism is what he calls it. And so his goal is to get to know the person in a way that you get to know somebody on like a first date. That's very conversational, very approachable, be interested in the other person, what they have to say, their reasons for their beliefs and things like that. But he's like, he's talking to live people or whatever, they're on the live feed. And he's like, for those of you guys who don't know, Elijah actually runs Dank Pro-Life Memes. And he's like, and see, the fact that you asked the question makes me rethink it, because while yes, I do promote this first date evangelism, on one hand, I can see the value in kind of being witty, kind of being snarky when somebody is just looking at your content. If you are, and so this is where he kind of like stopped and went on to a different question, but I'm going to kind of go further is, when he was saying that, it was like, if you're talking to somebody and you are being snarky, basically what you're saying is I'm better than you, or I'm smarter than you, or something like that, where you're creating this like dichotomy between you and the other person. So you're saying like, you know, obviously I'm way something better, whatever than you. But if you're, for me, when I create my content, my goal, and this gets into what you were saying, Rachel, is my goal is to create content that can be shareable. So it has to be the people who are looking at it have to be confident that it represents what they think. So I have to make sure I'm using words right. So like we're going to get into this in the other podcasts about whether or not abortions and things like that, how we use intent and things like that. And so my word choice is very important. How I phrase things is very important. I have to be short because, you know, one of the main problems with memes from my perspective is that they're too short to reveal any sort of actual information that can be used as conversational. So what I do is I take like 6 sentences that would represent the pro-life perspective, and I'll kind of like jam them in and see how much I can get away with, throw the rest of it away. And so I can get just enough information to stuff it into this one little thing. And I think Josh and I were talking a little while ago about it. And it was the phrase life begins at conception is good as long as you know what the person mean by life begins and conception. So what I did is I changed it just a little bit. Well, not just a little bit, I changed it a lot, but in a way that was able to convey the most amount of information with the least confusion as quickly as possible. So what I changed that to in my circles, I guess, is a new human organism begins to develop when the process of fertilization is successfully completed. It's short. It gets rid of all the objections that I can possibly think of, and while maintaining some level of not snarkiness, try to be as clear as possible. But when there is obviously a role, at least in terms of the stuff that I make, for a snarky approach. And I think what I do is my goal is to always have the truth value be the first thing. So if I can convey something truthfully first, that's what I do. I never convey something snarkily, even though it's false. So truth is the very top of what I do. So I don't ever want it to be something false. And if it even is possibly interpreted as something false, then I'm like, okay, I gotta rethink this. So I always put the truth value first, but then I try to rephrase it in a funny way. And sometimes being snarky is what's funny. Sometimes it's not. But it also will depend very heavily on like kind of trends of the day. Like back when the burning in vitro fertilization lab analogy was all the rage because of that Tomlinson guy. Right. Like he gave me so much content just to keep like going over and over, and like all the memes that were coming out, people were making memes that were addressing that argument over and over again. And like there were so many different ways you can address it. And I think that's one of the cool things about memes is had you asked me this before I made the page, I'm like, memes suck. They're the stupidest thing. They're so dumb. They don't convey information. But I think the cool thing about memes is they're sort of like, if you do them right, they're like bumper stickers where you don't want to rely on them. But if you can use them right, they get a point across quickly and show that you kind of like either stand for something or you believe something. And as long as, see, the weird thing is whether or not the people who are sharing the memes are sharing them to be specifically snarky, or if they're sharing them to start conversations. Because I think that the stuff that I make, at least, and my goal is to be able to have them be either one. My goal, I would love for every single meme I make all the time to be conversation starter. Realistically, is that it? No, I don't even think realistically the stuff that you guys put out can be always 100% conversation starter, because sometimes somebody believes something and they're like, see, haha, this guy who uses these big words in this blog post, right. they agree with me. So yeah, it's in terms of my intent is always to be truthful, funny, and how the funny works out is kind of, contextual. But ultimately, truth is the top of my list.
I think that for me, the way I see your meme page operate is more political cartoon than bumper sticker, because I do think that oftentimes it's going to be more thought provoking than conversation starter, unless it's one pro-lifer to another. And I think that when we're thinking about persuasion, we could think about direct persuasion or indirect persuasion. So I actually think, like, if ERI is creating content that's starting a conversation between a pro-lifer and a pro-choicer on social media or in person, that is probably like an indirect by one step persuasion, right? We're motivating the pro-lifer to have that conversation. But most of the time when we're creating content, we're trying to do that thing and pro-lifer to pro-lifer that then goes and does activism in some way or another. And so there's like multiple levels of indirect. Mm-hmm. And so people are coming to your page and they're getting a laugh and they're feeling like the only kid in high school that's pro-life. And now they feel connected to thousands of other pro-life people. I think that is doing something that is helpful for persuasion, but not directly by them having the shareable thing or the laugh right away that day. And so I think a lot of times political cartoons are a raw rally for like-minded people, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If the buck stops there, yes. But if it keeps going and initiates change, then I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah, and I actually had like-minded people written down here because a lot of what my stuff is, I don't know if it's just because of, you know, where Facebook is pushing my stuff to or whatever, but a lot of what I get is a lot of like-minded people sharing and commenting and stuff, which is why occasionally when Facebook kind of like dulls my reach or something, then I say something controversial within the pro-life community, because why not? You get comments and then my views go back up. So yeah, but I actually had, I don't remember exactly who it was or what the story was, but somebody at an actual conference, like a real life person, came up to me because after we had been talking for a little while, I was talking to like a group of people, and then they came up to me separately and they were like, "You hear the guy who runs Dank Pro-Life Memes?" I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Thank you so much for what you do," because a lot of what I do is I'm like the lone person, like you saying, the only pro-life person at my high school. And I really appreciate it. And after getting kicked, you know, metaphorically getting kicked by my friends, then going home and disagreeing with my family, and then going and volunteering over the weekend, and only to have saved no babies when I was outside sidewalk counseling, I go home and I scroll through your memes and it makes my day. I'm like, that's like, it's such a weird thing to me, because like, it feels like to me just making jokes on the internet about abortion isn't really all that great, but like, it's really helping these people to be able to continue doing what they're able to do, because I don't have the time to go out and do this kind of stuff. And so it was a really big encouragement. So whoever, if the person's listening, thank you for, you know, allowing me to, you know, I guess forcing me to continue, because there's a lot of times where I'm like, this is just useless. Like, what am I even doing? making these dumb jokes about this very serious issue. But again, like, I've gotten lots of messages from people who are saying that it's really helpful to them. It's really a big encouragement. And what I do too is I kind of also try to pepper in like the more thought-provoking stuff too. I remember the first time I posted anything about the violinist, I was under the impression that most pro-lifers knew stuff about the violinist. Oh boy, was I wrong. And it was something where I was getting like regularly like 300, 400, 500 500 likes or whatever on each one of the things. And I posted something about the violinist and it was like 13 likes. I'm like, 13? Like, what is this? And so I started like poking around and trying to figure out a little bit more, but I was like, people don't know this stuff. And so then what I was like, okay, on top of making these jokes, one of my goals is going to be to educate pro-lifers, because if I'm doing something within a group of like-minded people, then I want to just do more than just, you know, say, rah, rah, great job. I want to do rah, rah, do better. Mm-hmm. Rah, rah, understand things more, so that when you're actually approached by by people who know something about the violinist or by the in vitro fertilization thing or any other of these arguments, I want you to have heard about it. And I don't want you to have heard about it first from them. If you have to hear about it first from a meme page, okay, works for me. I'm good.
And to be fair, you are a lot of times like pointing people to more resources too. You've been really generous with that. I was going to say, hey, you can learn more at ERI or other groups. Like, it's not like you're trying to make it just about the meme and it all stops there. A lot of times you're piquing people's interest and then kind of saying you can learn more about this at this place. Talk a little bit about strawman. Because I think a lot of times I've seen pro-life people concerned about the idea of straw men and memes. And I know that I've said a thing sometimes where it's like, I don't know if it's possible. If it is, it's really hard to make a meme that isn't a straw man of as like a smart version of that position. And you and I had a lot of conversations about this. Like, I don't know, it was a few years ago, but we're kind of, you had started and we were like, it's like interested in this, like, cause you were clearly a lot funnier than we are. And it was like, this is like a really interesting idea. And then we started talking about straw man. And I feel like there was some kind of evolution where now, like recently in preparation for this interview, I went back and looked through the last several weeks of your memes. And I feel like your memes aren't all straw man-y. In fact, I don't think very many of them are. They're funny, but I don't think that it's as straw man-y as it used to be. Maybe I'm interested in what is your perspective on straw man. Do you have straw man in your memes ever? Is it sometimes but less than before? Does it matter? I'm interested in your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So the way I approach it is you can never ever make a meme or a rebuttal to anything and fully encapsulate every single person's perspective on the opposite side. It's like impossible. Like we could be talking about something very specific for the next hour, and we would still have a handful of people on the pro-choice side who say, well, they didn't address anything I said. And what they would incorrectly do is say, well, no, because they're attacking a straw man. And one of the things that I've learned is that when you specifically attack one type of argument, just because you haven't, let's say they have 1 through 10 versions of that argument, you can attack 1, 2, 3, and that doesn't mean you're straw manning number 8 and number 9. That just means you didn't address it. And that happens to me like constantly whenever a pro-choice person will come onto my page and say, well, this is what I believe about personhood. That's the most, like if I'll mock somebody who say that, personhood begins at birth, because in fact, there are many people who believe that. So I'll mock that, or I will poke fun at it, or I'll refute it. And then they'll say, well, that's not what I believe. I was like, okay, well, what do you believe? Like, right. And then if they accuse me of attacking a straw man, it's like, well, no, I'm not attacking a straw man. Here's a screenshot of one of your buddies saying it, or here's somebody else actually saying it. So I'm not attack. If the way that I think they should interpret it is, oh, they're just refuting something that I'm not saying. But the way that they interpret it is they're straw manning me. And so what I try to do is I try to be very specific on what argument I'm addressing. And I never deliberately post straw men. Sometimes if I'm doing something kind of ironic, it might be interpreted that way. But I deliberately avoid straw men, but I know that there's no way that I can address every single variant of bodily autonomy in a single meme. It's just It's impossible. So I never would on purpose do a straw man, because that bothers me more than I think it bothers a lot of people, especially when they do it to me too. I'm like, oh, it's not anything close to what I'm saying. But yeah, I think there has been an evolution. I actually did really appreciate when I think it was you and Tim, we were talking about it, and you guys went through a bunch of the memes that I'd originally made, and I remember thinking it was so funny when I made up a meme template where it was that little paperclip guy from the Microsoft Word in like 1999 or whatever. And I said, it looks like you're trying to argue for the homicide of tiny humans. Did you want to turn on caps lock and turn off spell check and turn on caps lock or something like that? And I was like, when I finished this, I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever posted. And then I've ever made, I posted it. And then like, that was the one thing that Tim, I think specifically Tim was like, I hate this one. And I'm like, but I like this one. And he's like, no, all it does is paint them in a bad light. And I'm like, but it's funny. It's funny. And he's like, but it's just demonizing them. I was like, fine. You're right. Fine.
To your credit, you were super open-minded during those conversations.
I appreciate that.
How often would you say that the humor you're using is particularly snarky in your post? Would you say every post is like that? For people who have not really encountered your page, like if you had to give an overview and you're doing your, assessment, how often are you doing that?
How often am I being snarky versus being something else?
You're using snarky humor in particular, or you're doing something that's mocking versus maybe more of a lighthearted humor or something that's relevant or relatable.
I would say snark is probably a decent portion of it. Because even something like this recent one where I had it's like a COVID-19 one where it says how exposed is your job, and then it says abortionist and please enter a valid job. Like that's super snarky. Yes. but I mean, what? It's also, but so, and then there's like other things, I don't know, like I think a portion of the shareability of a meme will depend on how punchy it is, like in terms of like exactly what you want it to say and the format. And so like people will typically, they want to be seen, especially now, they want to be seen as like the sharer of good memes. I don't know how many friends or stuff like that you guys have on Facebook, but if you look at the ones that are getting the most shares, those are almost always the ones that are probably like in the snarky range. Right. So like I was saying before, one of my goals is to be as truthful as possible first, but then in a funny package. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to say exactly how many are snarky versus something else. I think I lean more away from relatable humor. I think mine's probably in the snarky vein most of the time. But if you were to actually talk to me like in real life, like I've talked to pro-choice people in real life, like I am not the same person. I mean, I think I'm the same person in terms of the way that I would respond to them, like in a short snippet kind of way, because that's just who I am. But I go out of my way. I'll be like sitting, like, it's like, 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm like sitting there making a meme. I'm like, oh, that's not funny enough. I'm like, okay, what if I rearrange these words? Actually this one's funny. And so it's really just kind of like like an art form, but I think I lean in terms of my humor on the meme page, specifically in the snarky direction. I'm not entirely sure. Well, I guess I think I'm sure. I think that's probably the majority of where all the stuff that I would fall is there. And even like, snarkiness towards fellow pro-lifers too. That's not off limits either, which is sometimes even more fun because pro-lifers are the ones who see my post first. So, hey, if I'm in a fighting mood, might as well.
Well, it's interesting you say that because like in real conversations with pro-choice people, especially in person, I'm going to not be using snarky humor at all talking to them unless, I think the only exception would be if I'm making a snarky comment about something I know we have common ground on. So if we're like in agreement about something, right? And it's a really great way to make us feel like we're on the same side, because whatever you're mocking is the victim, right? So you're like, if I'm going to bully an ideology, it needs to be something that we both agree should be victimized.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people might not get that from just seeing your page. And when we talk about mocking and snark and persuasion, I think the way I see it on a one-on-one basis or individual basis, it's not very persuasive. But on like the grand scale and the wide audience, that's where it's effective. And so if you're posting something to a public platform, but you're not adding someone. If you're adding someone, it's like a lot more difficult unless they're like a public figure, a public organization, maybe you could get away with that. But it would never work when you're necessarily, but sometimes I know you respond to people on Twitter. And so I want to talk a little bit about like time and place, because we're talking about, is it individual? Is it wide platform? But also I think, where are you at? And if you're on Twitter specifically, it's a different field. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think sometimes you respond to comments or replies to your posts.
Yeah, and so it'll really kind of depend. The phrase "read the room." Yeah. So you have to, like, if you're speaking in front of like an audience of however big, you kind of get a feel for the kind of thing that they're doing. Like, for example, the first one time that I went to Berkeley, the room was very different than the second time.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So there was kind of like a different feel. And so a lot of times I don't just write stuff out. I will write down points that I want to make, but I'll kind of get there in different ways. And so being on social media is a similar type of thing where it's all context dependent. And that's actually one of the things that marketers will say. They'll be like, well, if you're making the same content for TikTok as you're making for Facebook, then you don't understand either platform. Right. Because Facebook is for your aunt and your uncle, and TikTok is for your nephew and your niece. And so you won't talk to them in the same way. And so why would you be making the same content for both places? And it largely works like when you're talking about TikTok, but like for like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, you can post memes just as is on all the platforms. You can't post them on TikTok, but that's why I kind of like modify and make a little video format for TikTok. YouTube is similar. But yeah, it's all context dependent. So for a lot of the people that I respond to on Twitter nowadays are people that I've had regular conversations with. But when there's somebody new, I have to kind of like look at what they're saying. And usually what I do is I default to, let's come to an understanding. So like, let's figure out what you actually believe, or I can explain to you what I actually believe. Most of the people that I talk to, I usually will say, well, why would you say something like that? Or why would you do this? Or what do you mean by human? Or any number of these clarifying questions that we know about. And just so I can get a feel for what they're saying. And in the first response, what I've found is that they will either respond accordingly, and they'll say, oh, like, this person actually is interested in having a conversation. That's weird. I wasn't expecting that from the meme you just posted, but okay, let's go with it. And so then we go with it, and we end up having a relatively decent conversation. Unfortunately, and this might just be I don't know, a fault of mine or something, but we almost never get past definitions, and it drives me insane because like all I want to know is like, what do you mean by human? And then they end up just saying 2 different things or 3 different things. And then of course I can't just sit on Twitter for 4 hours trying to talk to these people. And then the next time I come on, like 6 or 7 other pro-life / pro-choice people have jumped on, and I'm just like, why are you still tagging me in this conversation? So my goal with specifically on Twitter, my goal is to have a context dependent conversation that will lead to a good productive conversation. The ones that you might, I don't know which ones you've seen, but the ones that I respond almost immediately like a snarky something like that, it'll be because I've tried with this person and it hasn't worked. And so then it ends up going, rather than a one-on-one conversation, then it becomes a performance. So then it's like more like rah, let's, was a group of like-minded people, get them to laugh. And then if I'm talking to people who are very like angrily anti specifically me, I will make something retweetable. And so then I'll send it to like my friends in DM. I'm like, hey guys, look what I just said on this one. But it's only because the context has gone from, hey, let's have a cool conversation, to, haha, your sword versus mine. So like, it's very context dependent. Instagram, I almost always try to just have a real quick retort, but not an overly witty retort, because unfortunately the way that Instagram works is they don't group comments and likes together. So if I post something, and on average I'm getting about 1,000 likes on each one of the posts that I make, I will never, ever, ever get notified of something if somebody responds to a comment. Instagram just is horrible at that. So I don't know why they do that, but if somebody responds and I just so happen to see it, I'll respond quickly. I won't ask a question because I know I'm never going to see it again, but I'll try to be gracious and gentle. And specifically on Facebook, which I almost never see pro-choice people ever on Facebook, is I'll just respond to them in a quick kind of way. Or I'll just leave it up to the people who are arguing already in the comments.
Right. Feeding the sharks.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then the very little bit of content that I have ever made on YouTube and on TikTok, TikTok's super weird. I don't know if you guys do anything on TikTok, but TikTok's super weird, especially within pro-life circles, is because you'll have people just come on and they'll just say pro-choice, and then it'll be like, the nail painting emoji. And I'm like, thank you for your invaluable contribution. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, it'll be a response to a pro-choice argument, and they will literally say nothing except, guess what? I'm pro-choice. And then YouTube ends up being like these long paragraph diatribes, and then I'm just like, I don't want to respond to that, or I'll just use it as the next thing to respond to. Right. So yeah, it's all very context dependent. And I think I've found out kind of like the right way to do it, but can always change how I'm doing it.
So I would love to read you a full comment that we got from one of our pro-choice followers when we had put out and said, we are interviewing Dank Pro-Life Memes guy. Do you have anything you'd like us to ask him? And, we've got a few questions. We'll do this kind of at the end of this episode that are a little bit more about you. But this was kind of fits within the topic that we're talking about. And he was more critical of Dank Pro-Life Memes. And I just thought, like, hey, we've got the guy right here. I'm just going to read you verbatim what he said, and I'm interested in anything that you have to say back to him, because he does comment pretty often on our stuff. He is sometimes respectful. So it's not just a troll kind of thing. So anyway, he said,
context, thank you.
Yeah. He said, one reason I admire ERI is because of its commitment to civil and productive philosophical discourse. I appreciate that the folks at ERI try to be charitable and take the pro-choice approach at its strongest, as well as try to really understand what the opposition is saying. This approach is very much contrasted by Elijah and his account. In fact, I have found that his account has spawned numerous similar types of comments that simply employ snark and insults towards pro-choice positions and individuals. The question I would like asked is, how do you believe that we can have civil and respectful dialogue on this issue if yours and many similar accounts want to push uncharitable memes that do nothing but insult pro-choice advocates? What would you say to him?
That's actually the opposite of my goal. That last sentence is the opposite of my goal. My goal is to not attack like straw men. My goal is also not to attack pro-choice people. My goal has always been to attack the ideas and to whenever possible, I guess, to promote civil discourse, but more importantly, for at least in terms of, kind of ranking my abilities as a meme page, is to promote understanding in terms of, actually you have to understand what is being said in order to be able to respond to it. And so, like we were talking about earlier, there might be one version of the bodily rights argument that I might be responding to, where this guy might think that I'm not responding appropriately because I'm not responding to his version of it, right, or what he has heard. And so what I've done is I've made, I think, are they folders? Something like that, with a whole bunch of different types of memes. They're all categorized. And so I have a bodily autonomy one, and I have a personhood one, and stuff like that. And so what I'm hoping is what would happen is the people that would be using the memes in like a conversation or something would go through and they would say, okay, this is actually what this person is saying, or this is not what this person is saying, so I won't use it. But yeah, so my original intent, and my intent still, is not to just purely mock. Like I was saying before, it's convey truth first with some kind of like a sassy, kind of witty undertone, funny, right, stuff like that. But I also am not going to deny that other meme pages have come up and that they have taken an approach that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, or do it in my sense. And I've actually noticed that there's a lot of them on Instagram. And I've gotten messages from people who are like, hey, guess what? I created a meme page too, a pro-life meme page. You're a major inspiration of mine. I'm like, thank you. Your memes suck.
I want to defend you in one way, in that, and this is something that the different, like, kind of various staff and volunteers of Secular Pro-Life helped me realize, that this might be part of like why this pro-choice person named August is feeling like some of your memes are uncharitable, is you are responding directly to people that you see. Like, you see these arguments. You're not just making up dumber versions of these arguments. Correct. But it's not maybe arguments that he is seeing very often. And it's also not arguments that we see very often, because we sort of have a selection bias thing that can happen when we do all of our outreach on college campuses. We are talking to a lot of the sharpest pro-choice people. And so, of course, we're very focused on responding to the toughest arguments. And so, like, I remember having this conversation with Monica from Secular Pro-Life, and I was just saying, like, I basically don't hear people anymore say that we don't know when biological life begins. And she's like, are you kidding me? I hear this like every other day.
Oh yeah.
Because they're doing a lot of their dialogue on Facebook and on Twitter, where people just do say dumber things. And so on one hand, I kind of want to say, like, in your defense, you are responding to people who are actually saying these things. It might not always be the top echelon of pro-choice philosophers, right, but these people exist.
Yes, they absolutely do exist. And the fact that I'm responding to them, like, I wouldn't just be responding to like a pro-choice person I make up, although at this point, some of the comments I would have to, like, I can't even make stuff up that is this awful. But at the same time, there is also a selection bias for me, because the more comments that I run into, the more contextual memes I will make. And so for me, I would love to interact with people who are more like philosophically inclined or more self-critical or something like that. But like, one, I don't run into them very often because my news feed now doesn't allow that, because all it is just memes and terrible pro-choice comments. But two, I'm also in these fake, I have a fake pro-choice account on Facebook, and I am in these groups, and they are literally saying these things to each other all the time. And so, like, they exist. These people, I think, are there's more of them, at least in my spheres, than anybody else. And in fact, they kind of know me as a pro-choice person with my fake account. And so I tried a little bit to kind of push back a teeny, because I was like, I don't want to give away my hand, but I just want to see what they're thinking. And I asked something like, well, I forget what I asked, but it was something relatively nuanced. No response. And I went to a different group and I was like, okay, well, I've heard people say this, but what about this? Nothing. And like, these are groups with like 16, 17, 18,000 people. And they are just they do not care about the nuanced perspective. And plus, on a different angle, responding to the toughest arguments they're not very shareable memes. Like,
No.
It's funny though, because occasionally it'll be like, I'll make a meme that's like talking about let's just say the violinist. And it'll be like, I'll see like Clinton, Wilcox, and Nathan and Scott. They're like, hey, I like it. And like maybe you, and like other people that I know personally are like, yeah, that's funny. Or I see Clinton share it or something like that. I'm like, hey, thanks. But it's like 14 or 15 shares, right, or 14 or 15 likes, when like the average other post that talks about how dumb it is that people believe that life begins at birth, like that gets like 1,000. I'm like, what? So if I specifically focused on the more academic arguments, my page would never have gotten to the point where it is now. And while that's a shame that our conversations haven't gotten any better, those conversations are still there. And I just like to assume that the people that I'm talking to are new people, and that they're just getting into the debate, not that they've been making the same totally trash arguments for the last 4 years.
That right there is a charitable, read from you, to be
Right.
fair.
Well, I don't even think that would be the appropriate response to the smart pro-choice arguments. I think that mocking and snark belong directed at the arguments and the ideas that are just so dumb, you shouldn't be using them. And that's why we're mocking them.
Right.
It's like, big brain, not there. Big brain ERI, big brain this person, Thomson, she's doing the violinist. And so I think that's not the appropriate format to respond to those arguments. The political cartoon only can go so far, and it can't be that deep because it has to be bite-sized, shareable content that's also funny. And so I think that's one of the reasons that we need different pro-life organizations doing different things. And that's why ERI does not run a meme page. We are interested in helping people understand those complex arguments and the nuanced responses they deserve. And so I think that we don't know when life begins biologically should be mocked and pointed out and berated, because we don't want people using that. I don't want people being pro-choice because they don't know the scientific facts or that they disregard them. And so I think that is an appropriate distinction to make. And when I have seen pro-life people try to use snark directed at pro-choice people who are trying to seek out the truth, and they're making that type of argument, they come off as being very bitter. Mm-hmm. I have seen people on Twitter who follow me and like and reply to my stuff at a fair amount that I know they're seeing us, and they're also following ERI and the other ERI staff members. And then they'll do like Twitter threads where they're ranting about, I have no idea how anyone could be pro-choice. Yeah. These arguments are bogus. And I'm like, you're not funny. They're being very snarky. They're being very mocking, but they're coming across as I so smart Reddit, and it's just really cringy. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad that you're not going after the violinist in a mocking way. I think you can do it in a humorous way, but people who, have read Thomson's paper and are persuaded by that because they haven't heard a great response, I think that's okay. And I don't think they're stupid. I think there are better arguments than the violinist, which you'll hear about in the future. But I think that it's appropriate to be that way. Do you think that in mocking the stupid arguments, you are feeding people's vice? Because like some of these people that are in both the pro-choice and pro-life debate groups, I think some of them don't care about being right, or they care about being right. They don't care about changing minds, or even sometimes saving babies or women. They get caught up in, they just want to fight. Do you think that we're feeding that with memes like yours?
Short answer, yes. Mm-hmm. But I also don't know any way around it, because like even like, let's just take recently. So we've, not to do with the pro-life stuff, but just because I've been talking about this on Facebook occasionally, like the whole debate about the COVID-19 and the wearing the mask and things like that. And specifically, we're talking about masks. Like I have an opinion, and other people have opinions. And what they do is they go like to Google or something. I'm not entirely sure how they do this, but they'll go find, like, let me go ahead and search for something that agrees with me. Search. Right. And then they'll find it and they'll say, guess what? great. But like this could be like a peer-reviewed scientific study done by 16 scientists in I don't know, Canada, and like, is that paper feeding into people's vices? Well, yeah, I suppose, but like that's not the scientist's fault. I mean, it could be just that they were like, oh, there's an interesting thing to study in 1987. But now I think for me, doing that is more regular, more repeated. And so I will take the occasional time to kind of like, take a nice rib shot at the pro-lifers who are being uncharitable or who don't really understand the things they're saying or something like that. And that is either ignored or just ends up being so much conflict that I lose followers. So
I think there's a different kind of vice, though, that I'm interested in hearing you talk about. This is like the toughest question I'm going to ask you today. Okay.
Oh man.
Because I like a lot of things you do, but this is the part that I really struggle with. And I don't really know what to think. So, just kind of bring people into kind of an internal conversation that the staff has had sometimes, not about you, but just like in general.
You guys are talking about me behind my back?
Not that often. It's sometimes frustrating for us how hard it is for us to get our message out there. And we'll sometimes kind of compare with other people who are, kind of loud pro-life voices who are a lot more snarky. So this is like take you out of it. We're not talking about you, but like there's certain other people I don't really feel like name dropping right now who are very, very snarky, and every other thing or more out of their mouth basically is a conservative or pro-life argument, but combined with, I can't believe how stupid some people are that they don't believe this. And when people share things like that, I think sometimes they're doing that, like, or even just liking it. The fact, like the people that are reading that stuff every day or listening to on conservative radio or whatever, I think part of what they're getting out of it is I am so smart and the other side is so stupid, and they feel better about themselves. And then, people emulate what they hear, The fact that Rachel says oof means suddenly now my wife notices I say oof all the time just because I'm around Rachel a lot. She's like, you didn't used to say that. It's like, okay, that just happens. When you're around people, you pick up certain mannerisms and words and things like that. People can also pick up these like attitudes of kind of, go ahead.
The one I'm more proud of, to be fair, is I, like 2 years ago, probably started describing what Josh is talking about as spicy takes.
Yes.
Or like, this thing is spicy. How spicy should we make this title? How spicy should I be on this Twitter post? And now the whole staff uses it as just like our meter. And we started like, I think like, this is jalapeno. No, this is like habanero. Like we start talking and it's just spiraling. And I'm like, I'm going to use that for the rest of my life because it's so helpful to describe what we're talking about in a very quick. Go ahead, Josh. I just want to jump in.
So people pick up the mannerisms of the people around them, and that's definitely happened to me my whole life. I've got certain little things that I pick up, but people can pick up the attitude of just like they feel more and more, confident. It's not a confirmation bias thing. It's an overconfidence, and maybe kind of like then they themselves become a snarkier person. So what I'm wondering is, do you think that the part of the reason why people share your memes so much sometimes is because it's feeding that particular part of vice? Is that a thing that you wrestle with? And if so, what do you think about it? Like, clearly you think there's more good than bad being done, which is why you're doing it. But I'd just love to hear, what is Elijah's internal process about the pros and cons of doing these memes?
Yes. I would be lying if I said that I didn't go through this exact debate on every single meme I post.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, I think, yes, it's frustrating, I think, to me, because sometimes what'll happen is somebody will send me a meme and it'll say a word. It'll say like the word idiot in it or something. And I'm like, guess what? I hate this. And then I'll take the exact same thing and I'll find the meme template and I will modify it and I won't include the word idiot. And I'm like, guess what? I made it better. And I post it. And so it's, people like I have so many people that are like, dude, you are so picky. And I'm like, sorry. But like, I don't even really know how to like explain what I mean when I'm saying, oh, this one's too mean. But like at the same time, I'll post something that's like, ghost pepper on the spicy level. But like at the same time, it's not uncharitable. like it'll be real spicy. Like, oh my goodness, I cannot share that on my personal page because my mom will get offended, kind of a thing. But it won't be wrong, or it won't use the word idiot, or it won't use the word specifically. Like people give me memes with the word retarded in it all the time. And I never once have used the word. There was a meme that was like 4 years ago or something like that. That was, there was like the 4 panels, and the last one was like the dog that said, "Oh, he's retarded." I even made one of those memes, but then took out the last panel because I just can't do that. But yeah. Okay. So I have, essentially it's a every single meme kind of a thing. I'm kind of looking for an example at the moment, but I don't really have one. Yeah, no, I don't really have a particular one. Occasionally I'll just find like a particular template and I'll fill in some details with it. But even something where I have so many memes in my drafts, like my draft area, I make a lot of mine in Google Slides, because it's easy just to kind of combine everything together on my phone. And so I have probably like 30 or 40 of them that are just in there that I'm like, I can make a joke out of this, but I don't want to make this type of joke. I want to make this type of joke. And if I try to explain every single one of them, I think it would make sense. But could we extrapolate a theme or a principle from that? Probably. But it's just like one of those feelings that I'm like, it's sort of like, would the spiciest meme lord over here approve of it? And then would also Josh Brom approve of it? Probably. And then somewhere in the closer to the spicy side, I mostly just consult my inner Josh Brom with the truthfulness, and then my spiciest meme lord with the spiciness. But yes, so to answer your question, it's something I think about every single meme I post. And it frustrates other people because they want to help me make memes, and I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I thank them for that. But no, because it sucks.
Okay, so to thank you for answering my very pointed question, now let me take a moment to kind of defend you, and this is part of why I feel so complicated about what you do. Is I hold a lot of things that feel like they're in competition with each other at the same time, because I don't think I've fully 100% worked all of it out. But here's the part where, like, if someone were asking me, like, why should Dank Pro-Life Memes be a thing? Here's my defense.
It's a free country. Shut your mouth.
Besides free speech is a good thing. And this is, again, our staff had a conversation about this. I think we started talking about this a lot a few years ago when Tim and I were getting really into The Last Week Tonight. Who's that show?
John Oliver
show. This is before John Oliver did the lame Abby Johnson episode that was super intellectually dishonest because his producers totally knew better. And now I don't watch the show as much now because, like, now I know too much. Now I kind of went from I think they're doing their best to be relatively honest to I don't really think they care about being honest. But before that, I was arguing with pro-lifers who were like, he's not funny, man. I'm like, no, he's legitimately really, really funny sometimes. And so Tim and I would like play these episodes for each other and enjoy them together and be like, we have to admit, as much as this is really not what we do, this is persuasive to a lot of people. There are people who all they have to do is watch a John Oliver episode on a topic, and that kind of becomes their default view.
Oh, yeah, I know that guy.
Until they've heard something different, right? Yeah. And because it seems super well researched and like they've kind of looked at both sides, but it's also really funny sometimes. I'm sorry if you disagree. It is. It really is funny. And it was kind of like we had to admit, okay, yes, there are some people who are going to be more persuaded by the kind of thing that we do, but there are a lot of people that are going to be more persuaded by what's really funny. And we kind of had to wrestle with this kind of idea that I feel like kind of where we landed at the time was that's not really what we do, but we're kind of glad that there's other people in the movement who are being funny and might be able to change the minds of the people who like that's going to be the thing that they pay attention to. And I wrestle with those two things because I don't want us to be strawmanny. I don't want people to become more snarky than they already are. At the same time, like this is why is one of the reasons why the March for Life is a good thing. It is a great rah-rah moment for a lot of pro-lifers. It kind of like then feel less alone and more courageous and like they're going to maybe do something about it. And I'm trying to figure out how exactly what to believe about all this, but I think there is a defense for what you do.
Well, thanks. And I was one of the things that the level of funniness was something that when I do make the things, like that's why I aim for the funny, because I know that it's persuasive, even if it's just like, persuasive to the people that are on my team already. Okay. But at the same time, like it goes back into, I guess, what we first started talking about is when someone is at home looking, scrolling through their feed or whatever, and they see a meme and they stop and they're like, oh, but like, that's funny, but like, I disagree with it. But like, why do I disagree with it? Like, maybe, I don't know. It seems to me that for me, I think if I could have the same audience and the same retention rate and the same impact and make long form podcasts and articles, I would. I think I honestly think I would. I'd probably pepper in some kind of like funny memes and stuff here and there, but I totally would, because that's just who I tend to be outside of my meme page.
Right.
But the fact that the memes are good, they're getting a message out, they're persuasive, they're funny, and there's a small chance that the people that are seeing it will potentially be persuaded, like while they're scrolling through their feed with John Oliver in the background.
Right.
Possible. I don't know, but like, it's impossible to know that.
Right.
I have had a couple of people send me messages that, hey man, like this particular thing really opened my eyes to this perspective, or this particular meme, I showed it to my sister and she kind of like had to modify her view, or she got offended or something like that. So they are being used, at least in some cases, for productive conversations to begin. And that's good, because if I felt like all that was happening was that it was just snarkiness being shared around, and then pro-life people patting each other on the back saying how awesome we are while making more enemies out of pro-choice people, I don't think I would continue it.
Yeah,
it would be hard not to, because I got so many people.
And we're all evolving. I mean, your page is different now than it was 3 years ago, no question. Sure. And we're becoming a little bit more snarky sometimes too. I mean, Rachel put out a piece, "Abortion is Healthcare, a Misogynistic Non-Argument." That's a pretty spicy title, and there is a little bit more spicy stuff happening in our system. So we're all trying to kind of figure out the best way to do things, and I think people ought to realize that.
I've noticed too that even when I share some of the stuff that you guys do, like it just doesn't get any traction on my page. Like, so my audience, like I've shared something. What was it? You guys had a video where it was you Josh. Oh, here it is. How do you respond to infighting over strategy and other things within the pro-life movement? Right. I shared it and I said, if this guy disagrees with me on how to end abortion, it's because he's a coward, is stupid, and has a character flaw.
That was really funny.
It was exactly what you said not to do. And I was like, oh, that's funny. But like 23 likes. I'm like, pay attention to ERI. Like,
our stuff is just not funny and snarky enough for a lot of your audience to be that interested. It just kind of is what it is. Yeah.
And I'm not even entirely sure that you necessarily want the same audience looking at your stuff as with my, like, do you want my audience? Like I was talking to Destiny, and she has a very different audience than me. She's feminist, like left leaning. And we were talking in California, I think. And I was like, Destiny, I'm catching up to you. And she goes, in what? I was like, in Facebook likes. And she's like at 42,000 or something like that. And she goes, yeah, but your audience sucks. I was like, your audience sucks. Yeah, my audience kind of sucks.
I mean, it depends. I mean, a lot of the larger pro-life Facebook pages have a lot of kind of the comments that we would all cringe at. And so like, I mean, when you ask the question, even is it like, do you want my audience? Like, I think obviously your audience, there's a lot of individual people in your audience, and some of those are not what we're talking about. But I think like, if I had to pick, I would love to see your audience continue being like in their passion and being like really and like passionate about this and interested enough to care enough to even like or share a pro-life thing, but then continue on a spectrum of development where they're getting more and more interested in what are the smart approaches people saying, what are the best arguments, and wanting to persuade people in person. And I imagine, the thousands of people on your Facebook page are all on different points on that spectrum, but like that's the direction that I would want to see them going. Agreed.
But how to get there?
I feel like we're running a little bit long, and so I want to get into some of the questions we have because they're so good. I'm going to read one from Renee, I think Frias is her last name. And I want Elijah to respond to this, but then I want to definitely respond to it too, because I think it's kind of directed at both of us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why don't pro-life leaders call out the bad pro-lifers more often? Example.
Oh yeah.
Read the comments under any big national pro-life organization's post. It's all fire and brimstone, calling post-abortive women murderers and sluts, telling them that they're going to hell, telling them to keep their legs closed, just awful, hateful stuff. That kind of behavior by pro-lifers needs to be called out because it's counterproductive.
1, agreed. We do. We should. And we do. 2, the audience that they're talking to, just like how we are talking about how you guys have a particular audience and I have a particular audience, they have a particular audience. So we call them out in the Facebook, like let's just say like in the response, in like on Twitter or whatever. What ends up happening is the people who originally posted it, nothing changes, and we just get their minions to attack us. And that's not fun. That's not productive. And what I would love to do is, if it was possible, I would love to reach in and grab the person who is talking and then pluck them out and put them right here and say, hey, okay, let's talk. But you can't do that. We don't have that technology yet. Maybe soon, but I'm not sure. But so yeah, I found almost always unproductive, but it doesn't mean I don't do it. I will continue to do it. And I do on a regular basis. Even like kind of silly things. Like I remember, I think it was like a year and a half ago or something like that. And I think Father Frank Pavone, he posted something. It was like tomatoes, and it said, this is a choice. And then there was a baby and this is a child, like butted up next to each other. And like, okay, I get what he's saying, but I also said, Father Frank, those are tomatoes. Like it wasn't like calling out bad actors or whatever, but like, it was just a little bit of like what are you doing? Those are tomatoes. But like, I don't know if he even saw it, but whatever. It was just like one of those situations where like, I had an opportunity, and I do that on a fairly regular basis, especially with my page, where like there's another example of another person, I forget who it was, who talked about, not wanting to, what was it? Oh, basically third-party voters were useless or something like that. And I'm a libertarian. So like I called her out on, I remember who it was now, but I'm not gonna say who it is. I called her out and I was like, hey, this is where I stand on it. How about can we talk? And then she really did not want to have a conversation about it. And there was a couple other people who very like anti-woman kind of attitudes. And every time I comment, it ends up being, if I'm responding to them, it ends up being just a bunch of people responding to me, not really understanding what I'm saying. Or if I like retweet it with a comment, then it's a bunch of people agreeing with me. So it's that echo chamber problem that social media creates. And so the solution, I think, would be for people to be more open to being called out. But that is not a thing. Being open to being called out, I think has, for me, I'm very open to being called out. And I think that's a thing that I can confidently say with the self-reflection, because for me, I'm an engineer at work and I'm not qualified to be an engineer, as per a lot of people's opinions. And so I work really hard to do what I do. And on a daily basis, I make mistakes. And so like I'm called out by my boss 2, 3, 4 times a day about why did I do this? And so for me, it's just kind of natural to be called out, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like I don't get offended about it. But yeah, other people, maybe they just don't have as critical of friends or something. I'm not sure, but to answer the question directly, it should be called out. I do call it out. And why don't I do it more?
Doesn't seem to do anything.
Try to do as much as I can, I guess. Yeah. It doesn't really seem to do much in some cases too.
My take on it is similar. I think it should be called out. We do call people out, but we have to pick our battles, especially if you're a leader or have a platform of any sort. You really need to pick and choose, because if you do it all the time, you're just the negative person, and people don't want to listen to negativity all the time. And if you have a primary objective that's anything other than, I'm here to be the self-policing pro-lifer. If you want to do anything beyond that, you really need to pick your battles and call out the stuff that really needs to be called out. Yeah. If someone did an act of anti-abortion violence, 100% you would see everyone calling that out because it needs to be condemned. But something like, and as far as the smaller stuff goes, like what they're talking about in the comment sections, I think that individuals need to start calling out too.
Yep.
So one of my favorite posts that you did in the last probably 12 months was just some sort of joke about, hey, just a reminder, you guys, you can actually get pregnant with your legs closed. I'm not going to go into detail, but like something along that line. Like you weren't crude about it, but you were like, just like a side note, like education, like, you know.
Yeah.
And I actually think that that's a perfect example of mocking bad ideas, mocking bad comments. And I think that if every time there was a pro-lifer in a comment section that commented that and someone mocked them and said, just so you know, you can get pregnant with your legs closed, and this is really counterproductive to our movement, you're not helping. If that was the line that your entire army of followers did under every post, I think things would get better. Yeah. It would take a while, but we can't go around doing that. We can't spend all day long just because I'm full-time in the pro-life movement doing that. First off, you get blocked, so we need an army. Because that person needs to get that comment 12 times before it sticks. Yeah. So the first 11 people are blocked. Maybe the 12th person gets a conversation. I don't know. Maybe it never sticks. But the more that's happening, and it would help. Imagine if every time we had that comment, someone was commenting below that. Yeah. Like that would be so helpful. And so I don't think it's just up to the leaders. It's the leaders to model the way. Yeah. Do what their primary mission is. If their primary mission is helping PRCs, they should be doing that. If it's helping pro-life people to make better arguments, they should be doing that. If it's helping make memes, they should be doing that. And so like we're all doing the same thing in different ways. And so I think that that's the reason. It's too negative to do it all the time. And I would spend my whole day doing it and not be done.
Yeah, well said. All right, we had just a couple of real quick other just listener questions. Let's just run through these before we end this episode. So Edward McConnell from your page, he had kind of a fun question. He says, so you're in a burning IVF clinic and you have a choice between a black boy and an Asian girl. Which are you going to be forced into saying is more valuable by answering a loaded question?
That's another one. It's similar to something I posted a little while ago. It was like, you're in a burning clinic and you can either save, what did I say? It was like a black trans woman and it was, and then the opposite. And then, so I was like, are you transphobic, homosexual? It's like, you just force this like super stupid conclusion, but it's using the same logic as the standard burning IVF thing. But yeah, that was one of the ones that when Tomlinson first kind of put that out, it was like something that I had just probably way too much fun with it. Just like making up these new stupid ways to respond to it. But every time they were like, what do they say? It's not the right analogy, or it's there's a word they use. I forget whatever the word is.
Well, the original's not the right analogy either. I mean, isn't that the problem with all of them at this point?
Yep.
If people want to see our response to that, we have an article on the blog that we'll link to in the description for practical tips for responding to the burning fertility clinic. And those are just like practical dialogue tips. Like, how do you help the person to see that the analogy is flawed, help them fix it, and then respond to the question that they're trying to ask, but probably failing to.
And if you go to thefetalposition.com/42, you can see my response.
There you go.
42, the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Okay, let's wrap it up there. There was more to this conversation than even I thought was going to happen, and so we've gone a long time. So I want to close it here, but I think this was really interesting, and I think it's the kind of conversation that people who are interested in either of our methods is going to be interested to kind of hear the other one talking about. So thanks for a very interesting conversation, and we'll be bringing Elijah back for the next podcast so we can talk about confusing pro-life language.
Thank you for listening to the Equipped for Life podcast, a project of Equal Rights Institute. Equal Rights Institute uses speaking, writing, YouTube videos, podcasts, online courses, and campus outreach to help pro-life advocates in the areas of practical dialogue tips, relational apologetics, pro-life philosophy, and sidewalk counseling. If you've been helped by this podcast, please consider supporting it by making a donation at equalrightsinstitute.com.